Good day everyone. So for today's video, we will now formally start our discussion for the subject non-institutional correction. So for chapter 1, we have the introduction to community-based correction program. So as an introduction, not all convicted offenders have to serve their sentence behind bars. Some are allowed to stay in the community subject to conditions imposed by the government. They are either granted probation, parole, conditional pardon, or recognizance. We have here the non-institutional correction or community-based approach. So it refers to correctional activities that may take place within the community or the method of correcting sentenced offenders without having to go to the prison. So like what I have said a while ago, not all convicted offenders have to serve their sentence behind bars. So there are persons given chance wherein they will serve their sentence in the community, and that is the so-called community-based approach. The Parole and Probation Administration, so this is under the Department of Justice of the government that is tasked to supervise the activities of the probationer, parolee, and pardonee, and monitors his compliance with conditions imposed. So, the PPA is the government agency. So, ang gagawin po nila or ang pinaka-function po nila is to supervise those who are granted probation, parole, and pardon. So, the community-based approach to correction as a way to decongest the prisons involves the Public Attorney's Office and the National Prosecution Services, affecting the immediate release of detained either on bail or recognizance, and giving priority to the trial of detainee who cannot be released on bail or recognizance. So, to make it short, the community-based approach is ang pinaka-alternative ng ating government para nang sa ganon ay mabawasan yung population sa ating mga kulungan. And likewise with the Public Attorney's Office and National Prosecution Services, mababawasan yung kanilang mga trabaho in terms of trial kasi nga pwede nilang i-process yung mga qualified sa bail or recognizance, and they will prioritize yung mga hindi qualified wherein they will undergo the criminal proceedings. It involves the efficient performance of the Board of Pardon and Parole in granting of timely release of prisoners and the effective supervision of released prisoner on parole or conditional pardon and those under probation by the Probation and Parole Administration. So, dalawa po yan. We have the BPP and the PPA. Okay, for BPP, they are supervising prisoners on parole and pardon. Okay, for probation and parole administration, okay, of course, for the for the person granted of probation and parole. So there are two forms. We have the um, parole and probation for non-institutional or community-based correction. So we have two approaches of our Philippine correctional system. So dalawa po yan. We have the institutional-based approach and the non-institutional correction or the so-called community-based approach. Okay? So we have the institutional-based approach. So remember, you undergo your course, the Core Admin 1, that is the institutional correction. So ito po yun. Ito po yung approach na yon, wherein it is the rehabilitation of offenders is inside the jail or prison. Okay? Kaya nga sinabing institutional base. Ibig sabihin sa loob ng institution or sa loob ng jail or prison. The institution-based approaches have 3 levels and are manned by 3 different government agencies responsible for the supervision and control of the numerous institutional facilities nationwide, so sa buong Pilipinas, which provide safekeeping and rehabilitation of inmates. Namely, we have the Department of Justice. So, they are tasked to supervise national prison and penal farms. We have also the provincial government. They are tasked to supervise provincial jails. And also, we have the Department of Interior and Local Government, or the DILG, which they are tasked in supervising city jails, municipal jails, and district jails. And especially, we have the BUCOR, or Bureau of Correction. Yan po yung under ng DOJ na sinabi ko kanina, which is headed by a non-uniform director under the Department of Justice. So, yun po yung secretary ng DOJ. So, that was headed by Secretary of Justice. Okay? We have also the non-institutional correction or the community-based approach. So, it refers to correctional activities that may take place within the community or the method of correcting sentenced offenders without having to go to prison. So, ibig sabihin, itong approach na ito ng ating gobyerno ay binibigyan ng tsansa yung mga taong qualified wherein they can serve their sentence in the community and without having to go to prison. So, they are either granted probation, parole, conditional pardon, or recognizance. The Parole and Probation Administration, which is under the DOJ, is the government agency that supervises the activities of probationer, parolee, and pardonee and monitors his compliance with conditions imposed. Okay, may mga kondisyon yan. Hindi ibig sabihin na sinaserve nila yung kanilang sentence sa labas ng kulungan is talagang malaya. Hindi po. There are still conditions that they need to strictly comply. Okay? So, yan po yung distinction ng institutional and non-institutional correction. Okay? So, for institutional, sabi ko nga kanina, that aspect of correctional enterprise that involves the incarceration or yung pagkakakulong and rehabilitation of the adults and juveniles convicted of offenses against the law and the confinement of the person suspected of a crime awaiting trial and adjudication. Kasama na po dyan yung mga tinatawag nating detainees. Okay? Detainees, ibig sabihin, they are still under investigation or awaiting trial or awaiting final judgment. Okay? Siyempre, they need to go to the jails. Okay? They are still detained. And for non-institutional correction, that aspect of correctional enterprise that includes pardon, probation, and parole activities, correctional administration not directly connectable to institution, and miscellaneous activity not directly related to institutional care. So, at present, the correction as a pillar of our justice system is in front of so many problems and controversies. We all know that. Among of its palpable problems are overcrowded jails and prison facilities. Di ba? Ang dami-dami ng nakakulong. wherein nagkukulang na yung mga institution nila, yung kanilang mga kulungan, okay? They cannot cater all of the persons na dinidetain or kinukulong doon. Yun yung pinakaisa sa mga problems na nai-encounter ng ating prison facilities. So, despite of the public clamor, the government cannot afford to lock up all convicted individuals. Okay? Society has all the reason to condemn convicts, but in so doing, they are just pushed for the continuance of their unlawful activities. Study shows that many convicted persons who have been incarcerated in jail or prisons, when they return to community, are mostly re-engaged to the same kind of offense or to some types of antisocial activities. Di ba nga sabi natin, correction is the weakest pillar, remember? Ano ba yung reason doon? Because of the failure to reform and rehabilitate the offender. Kaya nga, ang nangyayari dyan, they are engaging or re-engaging sa kanilang mga dating gawain. Okay? That is more serious, sabi nga dito. So, it is also an accepted fact that putting all convicted individuals in jail or prison facilities will definitely prejudicial to the government, considering that they consume so much of the government funds and resources. So, halos lahat na nga, halos 25% ng budget ng ating gobyerno ay napupunta sa mga kulungan. They are considered as our tax eater, and we people in the community are the tax provider. Okay? So, these are the common reasons for the promotion of community-based correction approach or the institutional correction or non-institutional correction. Okay? Yun yung mga problema na nai-encounter ng ating gobyerno. Kaya nga po, in lieu of the institutional correction, they created this program or the community-based correction program in our country. Okay? These are programs that are intended to treat criminal offenders within the free community. Ibig sabihin, this will serve as an alternative to confinement. So, it includes all correctional activities directly addressed to the offender and aim at helping him to become a law-abiding citizen. Okay? Nang sa ganon, if they are in the community, they will not recommit crime. Okay? Kasi nga, once they committed crime, ang mangyayari dyan, they will be re-arrested and re-incarcerated. So, sino ba namang tao ang gustong nabigyan ng tsansa, ngayon, nasa community na nga, ay magkukumit ulit ng crime? Well, in fact, alam naman niya na once he committed crime again, pwede siyang ma-re-incarcerate or ma-re-arrest. Okay? So, walang taong gugustuhin ng ganon. So, community-based correction programs began in the 1970s to 1980s and 1990s. So, the programs offer an alternative to incarceration within the prison system. Many criminologists believe a significant number of offenders did not need incarceration in high-security prison cells. Some inmates who might otherwise have been ready to turn away from a life of crime instead became like the hardened criminals they associated with the prison. So, in response, states, countries, and cities established local correctional facilities and programs that became known as community-based corrections. And these facilities is located in neighborhoods, allowed offenders normal family relationships and friendships, as well as rehabilitation, services such as counseling, instruction in basic living skills. So yan, kung paano ba sila makapaghanap ng buhay na hindi gumagawa ng krimen, how to apply for jobs and work trainings and placement. So we have here also the different advantages of community-based correction. Number one, advantage of non-institutional correction is that the family members need not be a victim also for the imprisonment of a member because the convict can still continue to support his family, not to be away from his children. So alam naman natin, 'di ba guys, kapag ka ang tao ay nakulong sa loob ng kulungan, nalilabel pati yung kanyang mga family members na ganito, yan, anak yan ng kriminal. So yan, hindi na sila matatawag na ganon or malilabel na ganon kasi nga, the father na for example, yung father ang nasa loob ng kulungan ay pwede na nga siyang mag-serve ng kanyang sentence sa community. Diba? So, that is very important na dapat hindi rin nalilabel or hindi nagiging victim yung mga family members natin dahil nga meron silang membro ng pamilya na nasa loob ng kulungan. And also, kapag yung offender ay nagsaserve ng kanyang sentence sa community, syempre, he can still continue to support his family. Okay, makakapagtrabaho siya, mapoprovide pa rin niya yung mga pangangailangan ng kanyang mga pamilya. And number two, rehabilitation will be more effective as the convict will not be exposed to hardened criminals in prison who will only influence him to a life of a crime. That's true, di ba? If you are being engaged to a hardened criminal sa loob ng kulungan, possibly, you will be influenced. Okay? You will encounter, and you will know what are the characteristic of those hardened criminal and possibly, ma-adapt mo yon. Okay? So, mas maganda ang rehabilitation or mas effective ang rehabilitation ng isang convicted criminal kapag ka siya ay nasa community. Okay? Kasi nga hindi ka ma-expose sa mga gawain ng mga hardened criminal sa loob ng kulungan. That is another advantage ng non-institutional program or community-based program. Another, number 3, rehabilitation can be monitored by the community. Thus, correction can be made and be more effective. Ayan. So, the rehabilitation, for example, parole, okay, or probation, you will be monitored by the probation officer and parole officer. And likewise, the community. Pag for example, sa community ka, nakapag-commit ka ng crime doon, syempre, possibly, pwede ka nilang i-report. Okay? So, you will be monitored by the community. Okay? And that is more effective rather than pag nasa loob ka ng kulungan, sobrang dami ninyo. Okay? Let's face the reality na hindi lahat naaasikaso sa loob ng kulungan. Na hindi lahat na monitor sa loob ng kulungan because of the manning level. Okay? And lastly, number 4 is cost of incarceration will be eliminated, which is extremely beneficial, especially to a cash-strapped government. Okay? So, like what I have said a while ago, sabi ko nga, magiging less costly sa part ng ating gobyerno. Imbis na pinupondohan ka, okay, binabudgetan ka sa loob ng kulungan, okay, dahil nga ikaw ay masisend sa community, you will be the one to provide for your own self. Okay? Mababawasan yung gagastusin ng ating gobyerno pag ikaw ay nasa loob ng kulungan. Kasi nga, 'di ba, pag ikaw ay nasa loob ng kulungan, responsibility ng ating government na ikaw ay pakainin 3 times a day, okay? The breakfast, the lunch, and the dinner. Okay? So, malaking budget yun para sa'yo. Kung for example, 10 years ka nang nasa loob ng kulungan, di ang laki-laki ng budget ang binibigay ng government. Okay? So, if you are in the community, at least you will be tax provider and not tax eater. Okay, so that are the four advantages of non-institutional correction. The family will not be a victim. Yan nga, mas effective ang rehabilitation. You will be monitored by the community and also especially less costly para sa ating gobyerno. Okay? The role of the community correction in the criminal justice system. Community sentence seeks to repair the harm the offender has caused the victim or the community, provide for public safety and rehabilitate, and promote effective reintegration. The community correction has traditionally emphasized rehabilitation as its goal. So the staff of the community correctional program has two potentially competing roles that reflect different goals. So number one, seeing that offenders comply the orders of community sentences. And number two, helping offenders identify and address their problems and needs. Okay? And lastly, our topic for chapter 1 is the basic principles underlying the philosophy of community-based treatment programs. So we have three principles. So the following are the basic principles underlying the philosophy of community-based treatment programs. Number one there is the humanitarian aspect. Okay? What did you mean by humanitarian aspect? So, imprisonment is not always advisable, sabi nga natin. Okay? So, there are some alternatives na binibigay ng ating gobyerno. Okay? Wherein the person deprived of liberty can serve his sentence in the community. Okay? Placing a person to custodial coercion is to place him in physical jeopardy, thus drastically narrowing his access to sources of personal satisfaction and reducing his self-esteem. Okay? Number two is the restorative aspect. Okay? The measures or there are measures expected to be achieved by the offender, such as an establishment of a position in the community. Okay? When we say restorative aspect kasi, maaaring ma-restore yung kanyang mga rights pag siya ay bumalik sa community. If he is being qualified for community program. Okay, wherein pwede siyang maka-establish ng bagong position sa ating community, wherein possibly hindi niya makukumit ang mga batas natin. So these measures may be directed changing and controlling the offender. So the failure of the offender to achieve this can be result to recidivism. Okay, paulit-ulit na nagkukumit ng crime kapag ka na-fail niyang na-achieve yung mga conditions na i-impose sa kanya. Lastly, we have the managerial aspect. So, for managerial aspect, okay, there will be managerial skills are very special or very important because of the sharp contrast between the per capita cost of the custody and any kind of community program. It is easier to manage, okay, those who are undergoing community-based treatment programs than that of custodial control. Okay? Kasi pag nasa loob ka ng kulungan, possibly, sabi ko nga kanina, pwede kang ma-engage or ma-impluwensyahan ng mga hardened criminal. So, mas mahihirapan yung custodial control mo kapag nasa loob ka ng kulungan kasi marami kayo. Unlike kapag ikaw ay nag-undergo ng community-based treatment program, mas madali ang pagmamanage or pagkukontrol sa'yo kasi nga merong mga community na nakakita or nakaka-supervise sa mga ginagawa mo. So, that is the principles underlying correction. We have the humanitarian aspect, we have the managerial aspect, and the other one. Okay? So, that's all for today. And please be updated for the next video. So, that are our topic for the chapter 1. So, thank you and have a good day.